This podcast is sponsored by nobody.
Yo, dudes, this is Tony Hudson, Denise in Just One of the Guys, and Sarah in Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, and you're listening to Tommy Throwback Kovac on Splat from the Past. I'd rather go to the phone book and pick a name at random.
Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today I will be welcoming back my good friend, the beautiful and talented Deborah Goodrich Royce. She has a new book out called Reef Road. I guess it's part of the trilogy that she had with Finding Mrs. Ford in Ruby Falls. And I can't wait to have her back. I haven't read this one yet, but I'm going to. But I guess it's another mystery novel, and she's been on an extensive book tour the last few months, and she's rubbed shoulders with Katie Couric. I want to find out about all that stuff. I can't wait, and maybe reflect a little bit on Remote Control, because I went back and watched it not too long ago, and I realized something that I had never realized before. And it's going to be a great conversation. I always love talking with Deborah. She's so awesome and so sweet. This is the last week of autumn, September. Halloween, October is going to be fucking awesome. I've got toe curlers next week, and you're all going to love it. All you horror and / sci-fi fans are going to love it. Also, the WGA strike is finally over. Now can we get some actors to up their game a little bit so this SAG-AFTRA strike can end? Come on, guys, let's go. Keep it moving. Also, happy 60th birthday, my podcast hero, Mark Maron, the Big 6-0. He's been doing WTF since 2009, 14 years, and I've been a fan of WTF since my recovery in the hospital. Thanks, Mark, for all these years of podcasting and influencing me. You don't know who the fuck I am, but I appreciate it. Please keep up the good work, sir. So yeah, here is my new interview with Deborah Goodrich Royce.
Hello.
Hey, Deborah, welcome back. How are you, Miss Celebrated Author?
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
I am just fantastic. Yes. Oh, my God, I'm so proud of you. This is so extraordinary. So let's talk about Reef Road. I haven't read it yet, but what's the genesis of it?
The genesis of Reef Road was the real-life murder of my mother's best friend. On December the 10th, 1948, when my mother and her friend were 12 years old, it was a Friday, it was Christmas, the girls walked home from school together, and that night there was a question of my mother potentially going over to her friend's house, which in the end my grandmother nixed, for no real reason. And the news came out the next morning. My mother found out her mother had sent her to the bakery to pick up bread on a Saturday morning, and she heard people talking, and as she started to discern what they were talking about, she was in such shock. She just blurted out the words, "She's my best friend," of course in present tense, not really being able to even conceive of her friend in a past tense sense. And there was a reporter there in the bakery who got a hold of her and drove her home. Nothing really happened there, but my grandmother was kind of appalled that this reporter got a hold of her, and it's remained an unsolved crime to this day. And the gist of it was the girl was home alone, and sometime that night someone came in a kitchen door. The father had left all these instructions of how she was to leave the doors locked, not open the doors. And by the time the parents got home from bowling at 11:30 that night, they found a trail of blood from the kitchen into the dining room, where she was collapsed on the floor, having been stabbed 36 times.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
That is crazy. So it's very Elmore Leonard-esque with a little bit of Hitchcock, because I remember you mentioning you love Hitchcock.
Yeah, so how it really evolved. When COVID shut the world down, we all know where we were.
Yeah.
I was in Florida, and a few different things coalesced. I started to do the research on the real murder, and lo and behold, naturally, when you go online in 2020, you find all sorts of newspaper articles, which, even 10 years earlier, I'm sure, might not have been available. So the first thing I found was that there was a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
All sorts of local Pittsburgh newspapers had covered the crime extensively. Mm-hmm. So I read all that, and as I was really digging into it, I made a decision that I didn't want to write it as nonfiction. The primary suspect in the real crime was the brother of this girl. She had a brother who was 7 years older, which is a big difference when you're that age. The girls were 12 and this brother was 19. And he was brought in multiple times for questioning and all kinds of other stuff. And I just thought, I don't want to get into that aspect of these real people's lives. And I decided I write fiction anyway, and I think you can get to really salient truths in fiction that sometimes are harder to get to in nonfiction because you're very tied to factual details. For example, the real girl had two brothers. She had the 19-year-old brother and then a 24-year-old brother who was married and living away from home. That was just messy. It didn't add anything to the story, and it was just confusing having this extra brother. So writing it as fiction, I was able to just get rid of him. So as these threads came together, it turned into a two-part book. One is a very internal examination of a real murder from the point of view of a very obsessive writer who's fixated on the murder of her mother's best friend. And that storyline alternates with the story of a younger woman whose husband and children disappear 3 weeks into the COVID lockdown of spring of 2020, and she can't follow them because of the shutdowns. So bit by bit, you start to try to disentangle what one woman's life has to do with the others.
Wow. And I heard you say in a previous interview that there's a mention of barfing sharks.
Well, so because the writer is obsessive, and she's her obsessions come out in research, I was able to really indulge that part of my own mind. And lo and behold, I did come across this whole wacky thing about why and how sharks vomit, and believe it or not, it leads up to kind of a moment of a twist. So the writer's sections, that when you are listening to the point of view of the writer, it's very meta, meaning of the word, it's very self-referential. The writer's in a dialogue with the reader. She's winking at the reader. She's giving clues to the reader. And when she goes off on this tangent about the vomiting of sharks, something is about to be revealed.
Oh, God, that's hilarious. Yeah, too much tuna.
Bones and feathers and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. It's very bold that you mentioned Florida in the story because of what's going on right now politically over there. It's insane.
Well, yes, I do not get into any of the politics, but I do choose to set it in spring of 2020, which there was sort of a surreal quality to everything. I mean, a lot of people look back at spring of 2020 now, and they're very quick to judge decisions that were made. But the fact was, I think everybody was just doing the best they could. We had no idea how to handle it. We'd never handled anything like that, certainly in the modern era. And I think people were kind of just figuring out as they went along.
Yeah, I mean, the last 3 years has been pretty interesting. I have a feeling it's going to get even more interesting. as time goes on.
Yes. Yeah, I'm afraid you might be right.
Who does those beautiful book covers for you?
So I've worked with two women. One is a painter named Becky Ford, and one is a graphic designer called Cassandra Ty Marcellini. And they've done all three of my covers thus far, and I have loved them. And the Reef Road one is very special because, it's this bird of paradise, typical Florida flower.
Mm-hmm.
But then it has a spider on one of the petals. And, it's funny, when you have a spider on a book cover, you have to kind of look carefully and make sure it's not too disgusting. You don't want people saying, I can't touch that book.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you gotten any offers for like movie deals for these books or anything like that?
Well, because of the writer's strike, it has been really a difficult period.
Right.
My first book, Finding Mrs. Ford, which I know you've read, was
Yep.
under option, and there was an actress attached. And now that she's no longer attached, I can say who it was. It was Gillian Anderson.
Oh, nice.
And she would have been incredible, and I was so excited about that. And they were developing it as an 8-part miniseries, and then they got a couple of rejections, and she said, yeah, I'm out of here. And so that was too bad. And then just as we were about to go in another direction with that book, the strike hit, so just nothing has happened.
Yeah, it's been crazy. Yeah, I've been talking to a lot of comedians, musicians, other podcasters / historians since like midsummer and stuff. And I've been talking to like former actors and everything. But like, yeah, I miss talking to actors consistently now. But I have a feeling with the writer's strike, coming to a head this week, I think it's gonna happen pretty soon.
Yes, I'm very encouraged. Right now, it looks like everything can go back to normal today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's so cool about Gillian Anderson. I actually had a crush on her in junior high.
Yeah, I was very sad to lose her. Very sad. But you never know.
You never know. So you've been on this book tour for months now. Is it over or is it continuing?
It is primarily over. I'm still doing certain things, like I'm going to Ohio tomorrow morning to do a special event that's, kind of a one-off. It's alumni weekend at my college, so that was worth going. And what else? I've been invited to 3 really important book festivals this fall. I'm doing Writer Fest in Nashville. I'm doing the Miami Book Fair, and I'm doing the Boston Book Festival. And I told you them out of order, but those are kind of cool. Those are those multi-author festivals, fairs, where there are just tons of authors, and you get to sit on a panel with one or the other. So that I'm really looking forward to. And then the paperback of Reef Road will come out in January, so that will,
Nice.
Lead to a little bit more in touring.
Yeah, I see pictures of you with Katie Couric. How did that come about?
So my daughter's mother-in-law, my daughter Alexandra, her mother-in-law is a woman named Lorette Kittle, and she's lifelong friends with Katie Couric, and so she asked Katie to come. It was really simply that personal connection.
Wow. Yeah, I've been a fan of her forever. She's so awesome. I'm subscribed to her YouTube channel, and I watch her Zoom conversations. Yeah, I hope eventually she has you on. I think you two would have a great conversation.
Yeah, we did have a great conversation at the author series,
Yeah.
and that would be amazing. There's nothing I'd like more. That would be great.
Yeah, and I noticed on the tour you went to Los Gatos, which is pretty close to my hometown, San Mateo. I just moved to Modesto back in June, and had I been here at that time you were in Los Gatos, I would have come and meet you. But maybe next
Oh, I
tour.
would have loved that.
Yeah,
Boy, it's a very cute town. Just adorable.
yeah. One of the last
Uh,
times I actually did stand up comedy, I was there in Los Gatos. I played in this little bar over there.
oh, cool. That's very cool. Very charming town. I could see why, it seemed like they had restaurants and all kinds of really neat spaces.
Yeah, every year they have a Jewish festival, and one year Molly Ringwald was there, and I wanted to go there and meet her. And as it turns out, the meet and greet package was like super expensive, way out of my range, so I didn't go do it. But yeah, it's a nice little town. Um, so I recently went back and watched Remote Control for the first time in years, and oh man, it's actually a better movie than I originally thought. Way ahead of its time, and something I realized too about your character Belinda, she serves as a great commentary on gaslighting, in that. Belinda at first is stuck up and rude, but then, like, once she's in danger, then she's nice, and then at near the end when you two go into that house, she's become possessed and she's evil, and then she's back to being nice again, and then Kevin Dillon is evil. I mean, like, this is like a great commentary on gaslighting, and that's just the genius of Jeff Lieberman.
I think you're right. Jeff is so smart, and
Mhm.
we did an event a few years ago together at the Alamo Draft House in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And I don't think I had seen the movie since it came out, and I was so pleasantly surprised, exactly like you. I had that feeling that it was a much cleverer, smarter movie than I had even understood back in the day, and I thought it held up. I'm glad to hear you say that too.
Yeah, and it kind of predates Natural Born Killers, which came a little bit later in terms of visual style. And you look so cute in that space age outfit. It must have been hot in that thing.
Yeah, it was a weird outfit, but it was fun. I mean, everything was so stylized that it makes sense that he would, he just had that great vision.
Yeah, I mean he's already an out there filmmaker. I mean he did that slasher movie Just Before Dawn, where the person's hand goes all the way into the back of the person's mouth at the end of the movie when the killer is being killed. I mean, that's just Jeff's quirky style of doing things.
Oh yeah, definitely. He's definitely got that.
Absolutely. So about a month ago, I interviewed Kim Norwitz, who played Sherilyn's sixth grade cousin in Just One of the Guys. And yeah, she's in her 50s now, and she still sounds exactly the same as she did when she was 15,
Okay.
when she made that movie.
Oh wow! I remember the cousin. That's so funny. They're at that bonfire, right, at the beach or wherever
At the cave.
it is. Yeah, the cave.
Yeah. It's funny too because when my mom and I went to the screening in San Francisco back in 2020, just before lockdown, we were actually behind her and her husband in the meet and greet line, and I wanted to like go introduce myself, but my mom had a little too much to drink that night, so I didn't do it. But yeah, I just sent her a DM on Facebook, and she was reluctant at first, but she did it, and we had fun, and it was cool. Yeah, you're friends with Kenneth Tiger, right?
Yes. Yeah, good friends.
Yeah. Do you think he would come on here?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know if he does stuff like this. I can ask him.
Yeah.
Send me an email and I'll forward it to him.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great because He did a lot of great stuff back in the day, like Barney Miller and stuff.
Oh, he's had a fabulous career, and he's so versatile, and
Yeah.
he's one of those people who, he just keeps doing interesting stuff and getting these incredible roles.
Yeah, he was even in the improv group The Proposition with Jane Curtin. So I had Tony back on recently. Did you read Tinder Love?
I did.
Yeah. Oh my God, Deborah! No pun intended. I didn't know Tony had it in her. I
Well,
I used to think she was a prude until I read this, and I had to read it a couple of times because it was so steamy, and I just love what I was reading, and I still can't believe that she wrote it. What did you think about it?
well, I think she really did well. It's not my genre, but
Uh,
she really went for it, and yeah, yeah. So I'm proud of her for doing it. It's always, bold to go out there and write a book.
yeah, I was just like, you just want to torture us boys who had a crush on you back in the day, right? And she laughed. So, yeah, it was pretty cool. Speaking of steamy, I was listening to your interview on $2 late fee this summer, and you had a great story on there. You had your house turned into a brothel without you knowing.
Oh my goodness, that was in LA years ago. And the thing that was so weird,
Yeah.
there were clues along the way had I been paying more attention to, or had I not dismissed.
Mhm.
Like a lot of the times, I think in life, clues come along and we notice them and we think, oh no, I mean, come on, it couldn't be. Just like the lady renting the house for me was bouncing checks or weird things with the phone company, like she put the phone in her sister's name because she had past due bills. Those are not good signals when you're about to want to collect regular money from a person. You don't really want to hear that they're bouncing checks all over the place. It's just not. But I kept pushing the signs aside and saying, oh, well, it could be this. Oh, well, it could be that.
Yeah.
And when the whole thing came out, it was the time of that Northridge earthquake. And the town was very chaotic. The police were very distracted. And it was a bit of a pickle to try to get them out. In the end, they left within a few months. And it was because I had this older neighbor, a guy who was probably, I'm going to say he was in his 70s, and he had a lot of time on his hands.
Uh-huh.
And the boyfriend was on trial for something. And, trials, I guess, are public, certain trials. So my neighbor kept showing up at this trial. And it freaked them out so much that they ended up leaving the house. So thank goodness for this neighbor.
Yeah. Oh my God. This was pre-internet, and back then,
Yes.
I think people were a lot more trusting than they are now, and they just took chances. But even with the internet now, I mean, those scammers still exist. I was watching a couple documentaries on Netflix that they have out. There's this guy about 6 years ago. He said online that he was putting on a music festival on an island, and millions of people showed up on the day, and it didn't even happen. And this guy made
I
off with
remember that.
Yeah,
and they had a hard time getting out of there.
right. He made off with millions of dollars, and even his shareholders didn't even get that money. It was crazy.
I remember that. Total scammer.
Yeah, and even in the Bay Area where I'm from, there was that girl who had made that little device where you could check your blood at home. Elizabeth Wilson. There was that.
Oh, yes.
There was that story too. Yeah, God, it's so scary what people can do.
She's in prison.
Yeah,
That,
and I heard she's pregnant
and
now or something. Yeah.
Oh my God. But when those things happen, it's very weird for me, I find. And it's one of the things I think about with writing thrillers, that the mind, in a weird way, is trying to normalize. Your mind is saying, oh, wait, let me reorganize this. Let me kind of recategorize this. When in fact, you probably would be better off if you listened to your first instinct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I studied psychology a little bit in my early 20s. I think it prepared me for the future in podcasting. I deal with a lot of people who have narcissistic tendencies, and I try to, be diplomatic and sympathetic and all of that. And, sometimes it doesn't go over well and stuff. But, yeah, I mean, the mind is it's a very interesting tool that we have, but it's always underutilized.
Right. I mean, how little we pay attention to, whether it's sounds or sights or. My house was robbed last year, and it's actually making its way into this book I'm working on now, and that was a case of me completely recharacterizing what I was looking at. Because when I came home and I was alone, it was only like 9:30 at night. Mm-hmm. My front door was open. The screen door, the wooden door was closed, and there was this big piece of fabric, like all balled up, and then there was a it looked like a piece of paper, and I looked at this piece of paper, and I thought, oh, I wrote that in a book. I wrote that in Ruby Falls, where one character says to another character, if you ever come home, leave a piece of paper in the door jamb. If you ever come home and the papers fall into the porch, don't go in. Someone will be in the house. It'll be bad. And I looked at it and I thought, ha 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 ha. But I didn't leave it. I didn't leave any paper in the door, so I completely dismissed it. Then I looked at this big heap of fabric, and I thought, that looks like a drop cloth. Did I call the painter? I didn't call the painter. But maybe the painter came anyway, and I'm telling this whole story in my brain. Finally, I go into the house, and I see my staircase railings are smashed to bits on the floor. Wow. I call the lady, my housekeeper, I said, did you fall down the stairs? Now, she's an itty-bitty, tiny woman. Had she fallen down the stairs with enough force to shatter it that way, she would be dead at the bottom of it. And finally, it hit me. Someone had come to the house, thrown something very heavy down the stairs. It had broken the whole staircase to bits. And later, when the police came, they had taken a safe. And they had they had pulled the bed covers off the bed, crowbarred the safe out of the floor, flipped it over on the bed covers, dragged it down the hall, kicked it down the stairs. And what I was seeing out on the porch was my bed covers. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I was thinking about that. Here I am, a thriller writer, and I have this high consciousness that crazy things happen. But as I'm looking at a real crazy thing that happened, my mental computer is like saying, normalize this, write a story, make this make sense. And in fact, it was a catastrophe.
Yeah. Oh my God. To think that it happened to you of all people. That's scary. Oh my God. That's just a horrible thought. But I'm glad.
Well, the point they made, the big point the cops made, use your alarm, use your alarm, use your alarm, use your alarm, and get the Ring doorbell, do all that stuff, because there's certain things that are deterrents, it turns out. If robbers are looking at your house or somebody else's, they might just pick the one with no alarm and no cameras, which we didn't have any cameras then. We do now. Mm-hmm. So those are certain protocols which might seem a little extreme, but they're not.
Yeah. Real quick, you screen tested for About Last Night. You also said in that interview.
I did. It was a small group. Uh-huh. It was, of course, Demi Moore. It was me, Mariel Hemingway, Diane Lane, and Phoebe Cates.
Wow. Was that for Elizabeth Perkins' role?
No, for the Demi Moore role.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And with that,
And the screen tests were with Rob Lowe.
wow, and with that group of actors, wow, that's amazing. Did
Yeah.
did you just go there and say, "Oh, I'm not going to get this"?
No, because by the time you get to a screen test, you're pretty far down the path of auditions and callbacks. And I always had this position that I just didn't know. I really never took a position like I'm going to get it, and I never took the position that I'm not going to get it. I was kind of in a state of unknowing.
Yeah, Curtis Armstrong from Revenge of the Nerds and Risky Business and Moonlighting and all that stuff. He tested for Jim Belushi's role in About Last Night.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, I think I read that in his book. Maybe I heard him say, I can't remember. But, like, yeah, I could easily see him play that role and stuff. But that's what made Jim Belushi pretty successful for a long time after that.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, nobody knows what their destiny is, it's just a day-by-day process.
No, you don't know. And in the end, for me, I think all of it went into it to eventually lead to this writing career. And I'm glad of that. And I'm glad actually to be having the writing career now at this time in history, at this stage in my life. I'm really, really appreciating it.
That is just so wonderful. Yes, like I said, I'm so proud of you. Now, this next book you're writing, it's based on that break-in you said, right? And so,
well, the break-in is a piece of it. It's about a former actress who's contacted by a man who talks about certain touch points in their history together, and she doesn't remember him. And it's kind of an examination of memory. Is the guy telling the truth? Is he making it up? Did they have a little bit of a history together that she's forgotten? Or is he a fraud?
Mm-hmm.
So, working on that now.
That is so awesome. And you have any other appearances you'd like to mention?
What do I have coming up? Well, I'm going to be at Writer Fest in Nashville. I'm going to be at the Miami Book Fair, and I'm going to be at the Boston Book Festival. So 3 big literary festivals, which I'm really excited about.
Oh, that is so wonderful. I have a joke for you.
Okay.
You know the difference between tofu and a dildo?
No, I do not.
They are meat substitutes.
Oh, tell me. Okay. All right. I've got to go. Thank you. It's so good to talk to you again.
Yes, Deborah. It's always good to talk with you. And, yeah, I will definitely get Reef Road and read it. And
oh, thank you.
Also, too, we'll talk when the next book comes out. Do you have a title for it yet?
Right now, we're calling it Best Boy.
Okay.
But we'll see. Oh, email me your address again, and I'll send you a signed copy.
Oh, yes. I'll
okay.
Send you that email also about Kenneth.
Okay,
yes.
Great. All right. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, there you have it. Deborah Goodrich Royce. Ain't she a sweetheart? You gotta love her. She's such a talented writer and so awesome. I'm so glad that we got to talk today again and have a nice, fun little conversation there. Well, until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying there's no shame in living in the past because the present sucks. Later, dudes.